If you've walked through the center of any major city in the last 10 years, chances are you've seen them. A metal cart positioned on a busy sidewalk, stocked with colorful magazines and brochures, attended by one or two well-dressed individuals standing quietly nearby. The preaching carts of Jehovah's Witnesses became a fixture of urban life across the globe, appearing everywhere from New York to Tokyo, from London to Sao Paulo. They were presented by the Watchtower organization as a bold new chapter in their worldwide preaching campaign, a modern, sophisticated method designed to reach people who had become increasingly difficult to contact through traditional door-to-door work. But if you've been paying attention lately, you may have noticed something. The carts are disappearing. Street corners that once featured volunteers every weekend now sit empty. Locations that were considered prime territory have been quietly abandoned. And when carts do appear, something feels different. The enthusiasm seems muted. The volunteers look tired. The literature sits untouched for hours at a time. What happened? Why is an initiative that was celebrated as divinely inspired now fading into obscurity? The official explanation, if one is ever given, usually involves logistical adjustments or shifting priorities. But when you dig deeper, when you talk to people who spent years standing behind those carts, a different story emerges. A story of disillusionment. A story of questions that couldn't be silenced. A story of a strategy that backfired in ways the organization never anticipated. This is an investigation into what went wrong with the preaching carts, and more importantly, what they revealed that the Watchtower organization never wanted anyone to see. Part 1. The Strategy. To understand the current crisis, we need to go back to the beginning. The cart witnessing program wasn't developed on a whim. It emerged from a genuine strategic problem that the organization had been grappling with for years. Traditional door-to-door preaching, the backbone of witness evangelism since the early 20th century, was becoming increasingly ineffective. Gated communities made entire neighborhoods inaccessible. Apartment buildings required security codes. Working families were rarely home during the hours when witnesses typically conducted their ministry. And even when someone did answer the door, the reception was often hostile. Decades of cultural saturation had made people wary of religious visitors, and no soliciting signs had become a common feature of suburban doorsteps. The carts were supposed to solve these problems. Instead of going to people's homes, the organization would bring the message to public spaces where people naturally gathered. Train stations, shopping districts, university campuses, tourist areas, these became the new territory. The approach was designed to be less intrusive, more dignified. Volunteers wouldn't approach people aggressively. They would simply stand beside the cart and let curious passers-by initiate conversations. The literature would speak for itself. The organization invested heavily in this initiative. Custom-designed carts were manufactured and distributed to congregations worldwide. Training videos were produced to teach volunteers proper conduct and positioning. Detailed guidelines specified everything from appropriate locations to acceptable conversation topics. Being assigned to cart witnessing in a prominent location was considered a privilege, a sign of spiritual maturity and trustworthiness. This wasn't presented as an experiment. This was framed as Jehovah's answer to a changing world, proof that his organization was being guided by divine wisdom to reach people in new and effective ways. For a time, the narrative held. Photos of smiling volunteers beside their carts circulated through official publications. Success stories were shared at conventions. The message was clear. This is working, this is the future, this is how we will reach the world in these final days before Armageddon. But narratives built on optimism have a way of colliding with reality. And the reality of cart witnessing turned out to be very different from what the promotional materials suggested. Picture yourself standing on a busy sidewalk in the center of a major city. It's 10 o'clock on a Saturday morning. You've been assigned to this location for a 4-hour shift. Your cart is set up, the literature arranged neatly, and you're ready to share the most important message in human history with anyone who shows interest. The first hour passes. Hundreds of people walk by. A few glance at the cart. Most don't even turn their heads. You make eye contact with a woman in a business suit. She looks away immediately and quickens her pace. A group of teenagers passes, one of them smirking and making a comment to his friends that you can't quite hear but can easily imagine. You smile anyway. You maintain your composure. This is sacred work, you remind yourself. The second hour is worse. The novelty has worn off. Your feet are starting to hurt. The sun is getting warm. A man approaches the cart, and your heart lifts. Finally, someone interested. He takes a brochure, glances at it for 2 seconds, and drops it in the trash can 15 feet away. He didn't even try to hide it. By the third hour, you've stopped expecting anything. You check your phone when no one is looking. You chat with your partner about weekend plans, about congregation gossip, about anything other than the work you're supposed to be doing. Occasionally, you straighten the literature that no one has touched. You wonder what you'll have for lunch. The fourth hour drags. When it's finally over, you pack up the cart with a sense of relief that feels uncomfortably close to gratitude. You drive home. You fill out your field service report. Hours. 4. Placements. Maybe 1 or 2, if you count the ones thrown away. Return visits. 0. Bible studies started. 0. And somewhere in the back of your mind, a question forms. A question you're not supposed to ask, a question that feels almost like a betrayal. Was any of that worth anything? Here's where the investigation takes a darker turn. Because when you look at the actual statistics, the organization's own statistics, published in their annual reports, the picture that emerges is troubling. According to data compiled from Watchtower Service Year reports, the efficiency of the preaching work has been declining for decades. In 2022, it took over 10,000 hours of preaching activity to produce a single baptism. 10,000 hours of door-knocking, cart standing, letter writing, and informal witnessing to bring one person into the organization. But even that number doesn't tell the full story. Because baptisms don't equal growth. People leave. People die. People fade into inactivity. When you account for all of that, the math becomes almost absurd. Approximately 40,000 hours of collective preaching effort are required for the organization to grow by a single member. Think about what that means. Thousands of volunteers, millions of hours, all that infrastructure and investment and sacrifice, and the net result is barely enough to offset natural attrition. This isn't the profile of a rapidly expanding global movement. This is the profile of an organization running on a treadmill, expending enormous energy just to stay in place. The Pew Research Center conducted an extensive study of religious groups in America and found that Jehovah's Witnesses have the highest turnover rate of any faith. The highest. More people leave this organization, proportionally, than any other religion studied. Between 2011 and 2020, Watchtower reports show over 2.7 million baptisms worldwide. But during that same period, the total number of active publishers increased by only 1.2 million. Simple subtraction reveals the uncomfortable truth. Approximately 1.5 million people walked away in a single decade. In developed countries, the situation is even more stark. In Australia, the ratio of witnesses to the general population has actually declined over the past 25 years, dropping from 1 witness per 294 people in 1998 to 1 per 384 in 2024. This isn't growth. This is contraction disguised by global population increases in developing nations. The carts were supposed to reverse these trends. They were supposed to be a more effective method of reaching people in an increasingly disconnected world. Instead, they became monuments to the very problem they were designed to solve. Hours accumulated. Baptisms didn't. But here's what the organization didn't anticipate. Here's the part of the story that doesn't appear in any service year report or convention talk. When you place a person on a street corner for 4 hours with nothing to do but watch the world go by, something happens. Not immediately, not dramatically, but slowly, steadily, inevitably. They start to see things. For most Jehovah's Witnesses, the world, meaning everyone outside the organization, exists primarily as an abstraction, a cautionary concept. They're taught from childhood that worldly people are under Satan's influence, that worldly society is corrupt and doomed, that worldly relationships are shallow imitations of the genuine love found within the congregation. This narrative is reinforced constantly through meetings, publications, and social pressure. The wall between us and them is maintained through careful separation. Witnesses are discouraged from forming close friendships with non-witnesses. They're warned against unnecessary association with workmates or neighbors. The world is kept at arm's length, viewed through the filter of organizational teaching. But the cart changes that. The cart puts you in the middle of the world for hours at a time. You can't retreat to the kingdom hall. You can't limit your exposure to brief encounters at doorsteps. You're surrounded by worldly people, and you have nothing to do but watch them. And what you see doesn't match what you were taught. You see a young mother laughing with her toddler, their joy completely unforced, completely genuine. You see an elderly couple walking hand in hand, decades of shared life evident in their comfortable silence. You see co-workers grabbing lunch together, their friendship obvious in the easy rhythm of their conversation. You see a stranger stop to help someone who dropped their groceries, expecting nothing in return, receiving nothing but a grateful smile. You see kindness. You see love. You see people building lives, pursuing dreams, caring for each other. These aren't the desperate, spiritually empty automatons described in Watchtower literature. These are human beings, flawed and complicated, but recognizably good. And once you see that, once you really see it, the fear begins to lose its power. The division between us and them starts to feel less like protection and more like isolation. The certainty that you possess something the world desperately needs begins to waver when the world seems perfectly content without it. The cart was designed to be a window through which the world could glimpse the truth. Instead, it became a window through which witnesses glimpsed the world. And for many, what they saw through that window changed everything. There's a psychological dimension to cart witnessing that rarely gets discussed, probably because it's difficult to articulate without sounding disloyal. Human beings have a fundamental need to feel that their actions matter. This isn't vanity or ego, it's basic psychology. We need to believe that our presence makes some difference in the world, that our efforts contribute to something meaningful. When that sense of purpose is undermined, something begins to erode inside. Traditional door-to-door work, for all its difficulties, provided constant feedback. Every door was an interaction. Even rejections were responses. Someone saw you, acknowledged you, reacted to your presence. You were engaged in an activity that demanded attention and produced immediate results, even if those results were often negative. Cart witnessing offers none of that. You stand. You wait. People pass. They don't stop. They don't acknowledge. They don't even seem to notice. Hour after hour, you exist on that sidewalk as a non-entity, as relevant to the passing crowd as a fire hydrant or a newspaper box. This experience of invisibility is more corrosive than outright rejection. Rejection at least implies significance. Someone considered your message and chose to refuse it. But to be ignored completely, to be passed by as though you weren't even there, suggests something worse. It suggests irrelevance. It suggests that the urgent, life-saving message you're offering doesn't even register as worthy of a response. When this experience is repeated week after week, month after month, it does something to the internal narrative that sustains faith. The belief that you're participating in the most important work in human history becomes harder to maintain when the world treats that work as beneath notice. The conviction that you possess truth the world desperately needs feels hollow when the world walks past without a glance. And in the silence of those long hours, with no doors to knock on and no conversations to distract, the mind begins to wander into dangerous territory. Questions surface that can't be asked aloud. Doubts that must be suppressed in every other context find room to breathe and grow. The cart becomes an incubator for the very thoughts that the organization works so hard to prevent. If you visit a cart location today and observe carefully, you'll notice something that speaks volumes about what this program has become. 20 years ago, cart witnessing was dominated by pioneers, young, energetic, full of conviction about the urgency of their mission. These were people who had dedicated their lives to full-time ministry, who genuinely believed that every hour spent in the field service could save someone from destruction at Armageddon. That's not what you see anymore. Today, the typical cart volunteer is elderly, retired, someone with time to fill and hours to report. The carts have become a way for older witnesses to fulfill their ministerial obligations without the physical demands of walking door to door. You'll often see folding chairs set up beside the cart, thermoses of coffee, two friends chatting about grandchildren or health problems while the literature sits untouched between them. This isn't a criticism of these individuals. They're kind people doing what they've been asked to do. But the transformation reveals something important about what cart witnessing has become. What was introduced as cutting-edge evangelism has devolved into something closer to a social activity. A reason to get out of the house. A way to spend a Tuesday morning with a friend. The urgency is gone. The expectation is gone. Nobody standing beside those carts actually believes that someone is about to stop and begin a life-changing Bible study. The motions continue, but the meaning has drained away. And everyone involved, whether they admit it or not, can sense the difference. When divine mission becomes casual routine, something essential has died. The body is still moving, but the spirit has departed. There's another dimension to this story that deserves attention, because it reflects broader changes within the organization that the carts have come to symbolize. For most of Watchtower's history, the literature was everything. Thick books with detailed doctrinal explanations. Monthly magazines covering a wide range of topics. The Watchtower and Awake were globally recognized publications, printed in hundreds of languages, distributed by the billions. Having a well-stocked book bag was a point of pride for any publisher. The literature represented the depth and seriousness of the organization's message. The decline has been dramatic. In 2005, Awake magazine was published twice monthly, with 32 pages per issue. That's 24 issues per year, over 700 pages of content. By 2013, it was reduced to 16 pages. By 2016, publication dropped to every other month. By 2018, just 3 issues per year. And in 2022, it was reduced to a single annual issue. From 24 issues to 1. From over 700 pages to perhaps 30. Look at a cart today. What's actually on it? A handful of thin brochures. Some contact cards. A QR code directing people to a website. The thick books and substantial magazines that once defined the preaching work have all but disappeared from public display. The organization frames this as modernization, adapting to a digital age where people prefer online content to printed material. But there's another interpretation that fits the evidence just as well. When a publishing organization stops publishing, when the literature shrinks year after year, when the physical presence of the message grows thinner and thinner, it's hard to see that as evolution. It looks more like contraction, like an enterprise pulling back, like a company quietly acknowledging that the market for its product is disappearing. The carts stand as physical evidence of this shrinking. What they offer has become so minimal, so insubstantial, that it barely qualifies as a message at all. A QR code is not an argument. A trifold brochure is not a theology. And everyone standing beside those carts knows the difference between what they're offering now and what they offered 20 years ago. Perhaps no factor weighs more heavily on those who've spent years in cart witnessing than the simple passage of time. Jehovah's Witnesses have lived with urgency for generations. The end of this system of things is imminent. Armageddon is just around the corner. The time left is reduced. These phrases have echoed through kingdom halls for decades, shaping every major life decision for millions of people. Don't pursue higher education. There's no time. Don't build a career. The end is too close. Don't save for retirement. You'll never need it. Focus on the ministry. The end is near. But the end didn't come in 1914. It didn't come in 1925. It didn't come in 1975, despite heavy organizational suggestion that it might. It didn't come in the 1980s or the 1990s or the 2000s or the 2010s. And as each year passes, as each decade accumulates, the weight of unfulfilled expectation grows heavier. The carts were introduced as tools for these final, urgent days. Standing in public with life-saving information as the world hurtled toward destruction. But the world didn't hurtle anywhere. It just continued. Seasons changed. Years passed. The person standing beside the cart got older. Those who began cart witnessing in middle age are now elderly. They've watched 15, 20 years pass from behind that cart. The end that was supposed to arrive any moment still hasn't come. The children they discouraged from attending university have grown up, struggled financially, and in many cases left the organization entirely. The retirement they never planned for has arrived without funds to support it. The cart, which was supposed to mark the urgency of the times, has instead become a marker of time's passage. A monument to waiting. A weekly reminder that another week has passed, another month, another year, And still nothing has changed except that everyone involved has gotten older and the promises remain unfulfilled. The numbers tell a story that the organization would prefer to keep quiet. People are leaving. Not in dramatic, headline-generating waves, but in a steady, persistent stream that has fundamentally altered the demographic trajectory of the organization. The Pew Research Center's finding about Jehovah's Witnesses having the highest religious turnover rate in America is worth repeating, because it contradicts so thoroughly the image of a unified, committed, rapidly growing movement that the organization projects. More people leave this faith, proportionally, than any other studied. And while some return, most don't. Congregations across North America, Europe, and Australia are being merged as membership declines make separate meetings unsustainable. Kingdom halls that took years of volunteer labor and donated funds to build are being sold, the proceeds flowing to organizational headquarters rather than remaining with local congregations. The infrastructure is contracting even as the official narrative continues to proclaim growth and divine blessing. Not everyone who leaves does so because of the carts, of course. The paths out of any high-control group are numerous and deeply personal. But for some, the cart experience served as a catalyst. All those hours of silence, all that time to think, all those observations of a world that didn't match what they'd been taught, it added up. The questions that had been suppressed for years found space to grow. The doubts that couldn't be voiced in any other context became too heavy to carry. The cart didn't create the doubts, but it gave them room to breathe. And once those doubts were fully acknowledged, the unraveling often followed. So what did the preaching carts actually reveal? They revealed that the world is not the dark, frightening place depicted in Watchtower literature. Hours of observation showed witnesses a humanity that was complicated and imperfect but fundamentally recognizable. People loving each other, helping each other, living meaningful lives without any connection to the organization. They revealed that the message, whatever its merits, is not connecting. When you can stand for 4 hours in a busy urban area and generate virtually no interest, it becomes difficult to maintain the belief that you're offering something the world desperately needs. They revealed the passage of time in a way that couldn't be ignored. Standing in place while life flows past creates a physical metaphor for a faith built on waiting. Waiting for an end that never arrives, while years slip away unremarked. They revealed the transformation of urgent mission into empty routine. What began as divine strategy devolved into bureaucratic obligation, a way to accumulate hours rather than reach hearts. They revealed the shrinking of the message itself. The thick books and substantial magazines of previous generations have given way to pamphlets and QR codes, a reduction that mirrors broader organizational contraction. And perhaps most significantly, they revealed the doubts that many witnesses carry in silence. The cart provided something the organization never intended to give: time to think, time to observe, time to question. The carts are disappearing not because of persecution or opposition. They're disappearing because they failed, not dramatically, but in the quiet way that unsuccessful initiatives eventually fade. They didn't convert the masses. They didn't revitalize the preaching work. They didn't prove to be the divinely directed solution they were promised to be. But their greatest failure, from the organization's perspective, may be what they showed to the very people standing beside them. The carts were designed to be windows through which the world could see the truth. Instead, they became windows through which witnesses saw the world, a world that turned out to be far less frightening and far more human than they had been taught to believe. The carts are folding up. The street corners are emptying. The volunteers are getting older, and younger ones aren't stepping up to replace them. But the questions those carts raised aren't folding up. They persist in the minds of those still inside, shaping the journeys of those who have left, standing as quiet testimony to a truth that no amount of organizational messaging can fully suppress. Sometimes the most powerful revelations come not from what we're told, but from what we're given the chance to see for ourselves. If you spent time behind one of those carts, I want to hear your story. What did you observe? What questions started forming that you couldn't ask out loud? Leave a comment below. This conversation matters, and your experience is part of it.